everyone, welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. This week, joining us is Lorenzo Miniero, founder of the Janus Project, organizer of JanusCon, and founder of Meetecho, which is an Italian-based company. Lorenzo, we've known each other for a while, so thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me there. I mean, it's always nice to attend ClueCon and ClueCon Weekly. I always have a great time when I join.
I always ask guests to introduce themselves, but I think you can use just a short introduction because everyone knows who you are.
which can be good and bad news.
It depends.
Jokes apart. No, jokes apart. Yeah, I am one of the co-founders of a small company based in the south of Italy, Meetecho, as you mentioned. And we've been around for, I think, next year it will be 15 years that we co-founded the company. So we've been around a while, and we've been working within the realm of real-time multimedia applications, especially from a standard perspective, for quite some time. And we're mostly known as the main authors and maintainers of the Janus WebRTC Server, which is an open source WebRTC server application.
So before we get into a couple of things, I want to ask you about conferences you're organizing, and so you've been around for 15 years. So is Janus that old? How old is the Janus project?
Yeah, Janus is going to turn 10 in February, so he's becoming a teenager now. So it does feel like yesterday sometimes because I remember starting to get the first ideas on it, starting to work on it, and I even remember the day when we did the first comic. And it really does feel like yesterday, which makes me feel a bit old. But yeah, it's been quite some time. So next year will actually be a big year for us, not only because Meetecho turns 15, but also because Janus itself turns 10. So it's 2 big days for us, for sure.
Perfect. You did it on purpose. So you have the 15 days and the 10 years lining up. So it's a big party.
Serendipitous.
Speaking of which, I hear there is a comeback coming up. Like, is JanusCon coming back?
Yeah, it is. So we announced this a few weeks ago, and I was really excited to do that because we had our first JanusCon about 5 years ago. It was in 2019 in September at the time, and we really loved it. We loved every moment of it, and so we had a great time. I think everybody would join. You were among the people that attended, and I was really grateful for you being there and doing a great presentation too. And I think people enjoyed it there too. And so we were really excited. We wanted to do it again the year after that. But then, as we all know, the world changed a bit shortly after 2019, as we all know. And so that basically didn't happen. But finally, we managed to find some time to organize it for good. And so 5 years later, we managed to finally have a comeback of Janus, which will be the second edition of Janus. And as I mentioned, it will be during a year that is quite important for us for these couple of anniversaries that we have.
So when and where is the conference going to be?
Yeah, it's going to happen in pretty much the same place as the first one. So it is not exactly the same location, but really the location next door, because that venue wasn't available anymore. And it will happen at the end of April, so specifically 29th and 30th of April. So it will be well within spring in Italy, which is really a gorgeous time to be in Naples because it's really nice, it's really warm, not too warm. It's really a beautiful time to be there in Naples. And since we had shown participants from all over the world Naples at the end of summer, early autumn, we wanted also to show Naples in spring, early summer as well, just to show how beautiful Napoli can be in different times of the year. And so this time it will be just 2 days rather than 3, even though even the first edition was kind of the same way, because we had 2 days of JanusCon and then we had VoIP on the beach on the last day. So this time VoIP on the beach will not be a part of this event, unfortunately, but we will have 2 days of concentrated Janus and WebRTC fun there in Naples.
Nice. So what kind of speakers are you looking for? Like what should people send in as a paper?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, of course, since it is the JanusCon for Janus users, we call it, ideally we would like to have as many contributions as possible of companies and people using Janus in creative ways. So basically showcasing how they're doing things, how they're using Janus for a plethora of different use cases. So showcase the how you can actually do many and cool things with Janus in the first place. But we also welcome presentations on WebRTC in general, innovative aspects that are taking place in WebRTC or multimedia in general from in that sense. So ideally, we will receive many great submissions as we did the very first time, because I was very happy with the outcome of the very first Janus. So we had a very diverse input in terms of contributions from different participants. We had we managed to cover topics that were very different from each other, which was very interesting to me also from a personal perspective, because I like to learn how people were doing different things in different ways. And so I pretty much hope that something similar will happen at the new edition as well, because I do know that there are a lot of people using Janus in different ways, and I really want to know more, possibly from projects that I may even never heard of, or even better, let other people be aware of cool things that are happening and that may be happening a bit under the curtains.
We have had the same thing happen with FreeSwitch and ClueCon many times. Like people will send in a paper, hey, here's my cool project. Oh, really? Never heard? You've never heard of them? And they're maybe
exactly. It's great. It's a great way to discover new projects and also meet in person people that have been working with your project, and whether you have known them possibly online or even not even heard from them before, as you mentioned. I really love this.
I have a couple of good ideas. Like we've been doing a lot of benchmarking on which types of media broadcasting is preferable in various situations. You know all about it, so won't go too technical. So maybe a comparative talk about the results of that research, which protocols, what would people prefer. We even did a small, actually a human panel, like people watching video and telling us which type they prefer, like which type of streaming they prefer. So I'm going to think about it. Cool.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, it's always useful to know that. Cool. So I hear, and there's another interesting conference that's sort of coming back. It never went away, but it's coming back in full force this year, which is the Voice over IP or real-time communications. What's the name? Room at Positive.
Oh yeah. So last year I actually became one of the organizers of that room, which I was really proud of. And yeah, the FOSDEM is. I mean, not everybody may know this because it's usually an event that is very well known in Europe, but maybe not as well known in other parts of the world. But it's basically the largest and most famous generic open source event in Europe. Basically, people meet in Brussels usually at the beginning of February when it is really, really cold, but also really, really nice. And they meet in Brussels for a couple of days, and the organizers of FOSDEM basically take over a whole university complex there and set up the several different rooms devoted to completely different topics related to the open source space. So you will find we are organizing a room devoted to RTC, so real-time multimedia stuff in general, where everybody can contribute stuff related to WebRTC, voice over IP, streaming, broadcasting, or anything that involves real-time multimedia in general. But there's also stuff like desktop environments or databases or Internet of Things. There's really something for all palates. And it's usually 10,000 people, if not more people, showing up for a couple of days. It's completely free. You have contributions coming from all over Europe, if not even beyond that. So it's really a nice place to be. And since one of the maintainers, I'll definitely be there. So I encourage everybody watching this, if they want to have a chat or meet in person, I'd be glad to have a conversation about them there with them.
90% chance I will be there this year, so it's going to be fun.
Okay, then we'll have a beer there for sure. Then.
Yeah, there's I really like FOSDEM. I mean, it is my third favorite conference after ClueCon and JanusCon. So I'll be, but it's really nice. It's a bit chaotic at time, which is fine, I guess. Last time, a few years ago, we had 15,000 people over there.
Oh, so yeah, even more. Yeah, I was stuck at the 10,000 numbers, but I didn't.
2016, 17 were very big, very, very big. And it's really interesting. Like aside from the real-time communications room, which I watched all the talks in, and I was speaking there. I've been a speaker a few times. Otherwise, you just walk around and just walk into a room, and there's a talk about IoT security, which you know literally zero about. And it's interesting. So you sit down and learn something, and then you keep going on it. Like there's things I've seen at FOSDEM I've used years after. Like, oh, really? Does this thing? There is a project that has this feature we need or whatever. It's really brilliant. The only thing we need to avoid is being a speaker on the first slot on the second day.
Yeah, that's true.
Nobody's there. I happened to me once, and it was only me. I think it was Matt Hudson running the room, and one guy from India just sitting on the bottom line row, and I don't even think he was interested. It was just sitting there.
Yeah, that's probably because of that FOSDEM tradition of hosting their social event in that big beer place in the center of Brussels, and which basically takes all night usually. And so yeah, people tend not to be very awake or awake at all very early.
Yeah, you have people. It starts around 10, then people start showing up. But if you're a speaker at 9, well, still great. Good. So any talks you already know will be there at FOSDEM?
I mean, no, not yet, because the submissions are while we're recording this, the submissions are still open, so there are still submissions coming in, and I haven't reviewed them all. So I know a couple. I'm sorry.
When will they close?
In theory, it should close around mid-December, but we'll of course make sure to keep it open for a while longer, because there's always people that may get an interesting idea a bit later in the game, and it's no problem for us to basically adapt the schedule. So we try to be very flexible in that sense. Of course, I mean, don't submit something at the end of January, because that may be too late. But in general, we try to be flexible in that sense, and it's usually a very interesting schedule covering really different aspects. So it can be from XMPP to VoIP to WebRTC, and all from different projects. There's really a lot to learn if you are working in the RTC space.
Team XMPP. Nobody likes XMPP anymore but me.
Yeah, we started actually working with XMPP at the very early days of Meetecho, and we still like it a lot. So yeah, it's definitely a cool protocol and a standard one. I mean, we all love standards.
Our original call control protocol we wrote in Ruby to control FreeSwitch and Astros 2 was based on XMPP. Like it is an actual XMPP extension called Rio, which me and other 4 people know exists at this point. Probably less. Like I don't even know if anybody else remembers Rio. Cool, but it was I like XMPP. I don't know why people try and make up their own protocols when there are perfectly good ones. But then it's the industry. Speaking of which, so what's new in Janus? What's coming up?
Yeah, we've been working on some cool new stuff. I mean, on a few different aspects. So first of all, we've been working a lot on scalability in general, because we do have a virtual event platform that typically powers, for instance, ITF meetings 3 times a year. We are also covering RIPE meetings using a platform similar to that one. And so we've been working a lot on making that platform as scalable and robust as possible, which we've been very happy about. We've been working on a lot of audio-related enhancements, both in terms of scalability and in terms of quality of experience. So in terms of setup times, in terms of cleanliness of the audio, this sort of stuff. We've been working also a lot on some more research-related aspects. So, for instance, me personally, I've been working on bandwidth estimation. So I've been working a lot on that aspect. So figuring out how much bandwidth you have available to send media to a specific participant in a room, for instance, or for broadcasting purposes, which can be very helpful if you have, for instance, a simulcast stream that you need to relay, and you need to figure out which simulcast layer a specific participant is more likely to receive without that many hassles, maybe because they are on a problematic network, or they have too many losses, or they are on 4G rather than Wi-Fi, these sort of things. And it has been a very informative research project for me, because there's very little information about bandwidth estimation in WebRTC specifically when you start looking. And so I had to basically figure out a few things on my own and a few things from other projects and stuff like this. And it was a really interesting thing to do. And we've also started working a bit on artificial intelligence and machine learning a bit more because, for instance, we are working a lot on transcriptions at the moment. We recently hired a new guy in the company that is helping us on those aspects specifically, which will help us broaden a bit the scope of the things that we may work on in the future, because we are starting from transcriptions, but this could easily then become diarization in the future. It could extend and bleed out to beyond audio. It could start involve video for a few things in the future as well, and not just within the context of the virtual event platform, but also for more diverse and heterogeneous use cases as well. I mean, it's a really new application, a new context to work in, and there is so many good things and interesting things that can be done in that area that we are really excited to investigate and experiment with. This is, I think, really in a nutshell, just a really burst view of all the things that we've been doing. So there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, really. I'm particularly interested in the video broadcasting aspect of the work you've been doing because, again, I've been doing some benchmarking. So there's a lot there that's particularly interesting. In your opinion, is a WebRTC eventually going to take over HLS and all the other stuff? Because I really like it a lot. Do you think Janus could be a vector for something like that?
I mean, I really hope so. Also because I mean, this is not well known, but when I started working on Janus about 10 years ago, as we mentioned, also because it was also within the context of my PhD at the university at the time, and my PhD was indeed trying to figure out how to use WebRTC for large-scale broadcasting. And at the time, WebRTC had just recently come out, and it was mostly focused on conversational audio and video, or let's say a way to facilitate access to VoIP over IP infrastructures or to do conferencing and stuff like this. But I really wanted to investigate the possibility of doing large-scale broadcasting as well. And so I together with a colleague of mine who also got a PhD at the time, Tobia Castaldi, we figured out a way to create some sort of a tree-based distribution that we could use for the purpose, that we prototyped a bit, but we didn't invest much time in at the time because we were also busy on a few other things. But that was the main topic of my PhD at the time. And then basically, for a while, WebRTC was not really considered a strong competitor to the technologies that you mentioned, like HLS or Dash or others, mostly because there was also a bit of FUD around WebRTC in the first place, like the codecs are not good enough, or there are not robust enough to losses or a few other things. And FUD that is being quite quickly, I mean, dissipated because WebRTC does have all, if not all, many of the features that HLS has, so it can be used as a drop-in replacement sometimes at the cost of some additional complexity, but also with a much less latency in the first place, because the smallest latency that you can get with traditional broadcasting is in the range of 4 or 5 seconds or something like this. When you do need really sub-second latency or even below the half-second latency, WebRTC is pretty much your only option today. Which is why, I mean, recently there have been some standardization efforts in that sense. So you may be aware of WIP and WEP in the first place. So WIP is a standard protocol that is being worked on that is actually going to become an RFC shortly, if it hasn't already. That will help with the ingestion process. So how, as a publisher, you can contribute a WebRTC stream to distribute on the large scale. And WEP is the protocol that you use as a consumer, so as a subscriber of the media. And so WIP and WEP provide you the protocols to use at the edges of your distribution network. So WEP to ingest media and WEP to distribute it so that you can have WebRTC end-to-end. And then internally you can distribute pretty much however you want. And this is, for instance, how we saw a usage for our PhD thesis at the time. So the tree-based distribution that we created and worked on at the time has a nice fit and matches nicely with these new protocols that have been discussed, because it means that you can use WebRTC at the very edges, something like plain RTP in the middle to do a large-scale distribution, possibly a tree-based distribution. And that allows you to distribute a single stream that you ingest on a single server to possibly hundreds of thousands, or millions of WebRTC subscribers if you distribute this tree wide enough and possibly at multiple layers and these sort of things. So I personally am a strong believer in WebRTC as a potential solution for this. And of course, there are some things that are probably needed before it can actually become as widespread as the HLS is today. Some things are related to the tooling aspect. So we mentioned ingesting, for instance, and most of the broadcasters today, like people on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, use applications like OBS, for instance, to create their stream and then send it to a CDN to distribute. And it's of course unreasonable for them to change the application they are using just to use a different protocol or something like this. And so having WebRTC in OBS would be a great starting point, and that has already started to happen thanks to the help from Sean Dubois from the Pyro project. So WebRTC is now via WebRTC one of the protocols that you can use to distribute something. And then, of course, it's also a matter of ensuring that the quality is up to the task, so that you get a high enough quality also when distributing via WebRTC than you do when distributing HLS, which of course doesn't mean that WebRTC should always replace HLS. HLS has its uses, and it's it works very well whenever latency is not really a concern. But when you actually want to stream something in real time, like the final of the Champions League in super real time rather than a few seconds later, then especially, for instance, if you want to involve betting or other things or something like this that do need something that is strictly and truly real time rather than a few seconds late, then WebRTC does become your only option. And I mean, it could be an intermediate solution, because for the future in the ITF, they are also working on media over QUIC that will address similar use cases in the future, but that one is a bit farther along the road. So it's not something that will be really usable before a few years, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, I know I want to watch the Milan games with a very high latency, so you get a warning when something bad happens.
Exactly, possibly with a different coach.
Yeah, can we do that too? Like, can WebRTC replace Milan's coach, please?
I don't know. It helped with Naples because we replaced our coach lately. So I mean, hopefully it will do it for Milan as well.
Yeah, it is very, very interesting. Yeah, so one technical question related to that. When you're watching a game, you usually you prefer it to be real time than really to see everything. Like skipping frames is occasionally okay. But in a movie, you generally want to, so if you have lag, if there's something like a small gap in transmission, you want not to skip the scene, but you want it to resume. You don't care if you're late. I've never found a way to handle that in WebRTC. Like WebRTC will lose the frames, or is there any underlying protocol that could make sure you see an entire video from start to end?
I mean, there are, in principle, WebRTC, considering that it was born for conversational media, the main idea at the time was, let's use UDP. If we lose stuff, it's not really a big deal, and there are retransmissions that can help. And maybe there is forward error correction if we don't really want to retransmit that much. So there are some reliability aspects built in WebRTC, but they are not really meant for the let's ensure that everything is there and stuff like this. In general, there is one extension that could help with that, which is the playout delay extension, which really allows you to basically, I don't strictly know if it keeps a larger buffer inside specifically, or if it is just a way to delay the playback of stuff. But this playout delay extension allows you to convey information to the viewer and to say, this frame that you just received, don't play it now, but play it in like 5 seconds. And so that may allow the recipients to create a longer jitter buffer, and so taking advantage of retransmission, fill this buffer with packets that may have been missed, for instance. And so if some packets are still not there in that 5-second buffer, of course, they will last forever, but that still gives you some more wiggle space, if you want, for a purpose. But again, this is something that we do support in Janus, but we have never experimented much with in terms of how does it translate in terms of actual buffering that may be happening, or if it is just delay the playback of this stuff. I assume that some ordering is taking place anyway, especially if you want everything to be played that is coming in. So I do assume that there is a buffer in place there.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty interesting, though. I didn't know about the extension. Also, what I'm already thinking about it. What it allows you to do is effectively set the delay in an expected way. Like unlike HLS or many others, where you can get behind minutes if it's the different compounds. Here you can set the delay. You could have a delay of 10 seconds, and that will be 10 seconds. You're sure that it's 10 seconds. It's really. I need to go try it. In fact, is it supported in browsers? I suppose so.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. So it's an extension that the Chrome-based browsers definitely support, and I think Firefox supports it too. So in theory, it should be available in all browsers implementations, and it's also a relatively easy extension to implement because it just adds some a way to convey the amount of delay that you want to enforce in terms of it's not in milliseconds, maybe it's in the realm of how many hundreds of milliseconds you want to delay stuff. Now I don't remember specifically, but it's an easy specification to implement. And as I mentioned, it's implemented in Janus, and we expose APIs to set it dynamically during the conversation to see what the end effect is. So it's easy to see how it works in practice before you actually implement it, for instance.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to play with that. It's always good. Well, you see, you need a standards expert to find the things. It's not you need to know about it. Otherwise, it's. So you mentioned Quick earlier. How's adoption going for Quick? Because sometimes I try using Quick and then I realize half of it is not there yet.
Yeah, Quick. I'm not a great expert on Quick, but I do know that its adoption really depends on what you actually want to do with it. Because in principle, Quick itself, Quick on its own is not something that you can really use because pretty much as WebSockets, for instance, you need to associate a protocol with it to say, I want to build something on top of Quick that will use this syntax, that will have these expectations and these sort of things, which is why, for instance, Quick is the foundation for other protocols like HTTP3, for instance. So HTTP3 is now the evolution of HTTP 1 and 2, and is HTTP built on top of Quick and taking advantage of the functionality that Quick has. And it's something that, for instance, Chrome already supports and many implementations support as well. And then on top of HTTP3, you can build other stuff like web transport, for instance, which is a way to allow programmatical exchange of dynamic information, a bit like you would do with WebSockets, for instance, but using HTTP3 and using Quick to create a channel that you can use from a browser, for instance, using JavaScript to send stuff, receive stuff dynamically, and so on and so forth. And which makes web transport the protocol and the base, the foundation of choice for many other things, including, for instance, media over Quick. And this is where things get a bit tricky because when you start looking, for instance, for available implementations, you will find some implementations of Quick, of bare bones Quick, other implementations of HTTP3, and it's harder to find implementations of web transport because it is an evolving standard. So it is not cast in stone at the moment. And so anytime that you actually want to experiment a bit with this new functionality, you either have to rewrite these stacks, these different stacks from scratch yourself, which can of course be tricky because it's not a simple protocol. You have to implement proper congestion control, for instance, these sort of things. Or you have to find the right open source implementation that is in line with the framework you're working in. So you may find a Rust implementation or a Go implementation, or you may be looking for a C++ implementation, these sort of things. And it's not always easy to find this. I mean, we are really in the early stages of a more complete Quick-based ecosystem that can be used. But this is something that I'm monitoring because I'm really interested. I'm particularly interested in media over Quick, and I'm interested in checking whether or not it can be gatewayed to and from WebRTC more or less easily, possibly using WebAssembly and web codecs, for instance, to check how difficult it would be to have a WebAssembly and web codecs implementation that uses web transport to talk to a pure WebRTC endpoint, check if they can communicate, check if Janus can help make that happen, these sort of things. And for the moment, I've been mostly waiting for the right bricks to start from, and that's what's missing at the moment for me specifically. But it is a very dynamic environment right now. So Quick is definitely a protocol to follow for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned web codecs and WebAssembly, which is another super interesting component of the next generation of applications, I think. Well, WebAssembly has been around for a while, I think, and it's pretty effective. So I'm wondering, web codecs, are web codecs supported everywhere? Yes.
Assuming that WebAssembly is supported in general, they should. I mean, the only problem they have right now is really just in terms of performances, because of course they cannot perform as well as a native implementation, even though WebAssembly usually takes a native implementation and gets it close enough. But for instance, you just have to look, for instance, at the web-based version of Zoom that doesn't really perform as well as the native implementation when it comes to participating in a meeting. It really struggles whenever you have more than a few participants, exactly because they do make use of those WebAssembly and web codecs a lot for their own implementation. So that's the main problem. So they need to improve in terms of performance before they can actually be really usable. And of course, they are also a bit hard to implement sometimes, because encoders and decoders are not easy components, and so you can leverage some existing efforts and turn them to WebAssembly, which is something that most have done, but it's still not something that is really easy. So you need to have people that know what they're doing in that space.
Good point. Well, I mean, Lorenzo, thank you very much. Looking forward to see you at, FOSDEM first, and then JanusCon right after. We'll put links to the JanusCon website in the description, so you can go sign up and submit papers. And I should be able to make it. I mean, I never know until a couple months before, but should be I should be able to be there. So I'm looking forward to it, even if it's just a visitor. And Lorenzo, again, thank you very much for joining us today.
No, thank you. And again, it's been a real pleasure to join you again. And I really hope that you'll be able to join us, you and other people from the Signal Wire team. I'd really love to have you there, so that we can have a pizza right in front of the sea. That's always a good location.
Oh yeah, very good pizza too. Like not the Chicago stuff, guys. Sorry.
No. I don't. I'm not entering that pitfall.
Okay, yeah. Let's not go there.
Yeah, exactly.
The most fun thing was a colleague of mine is from Italy too, and he was in Chicago for the first time for last ClueCon, and we took him to try Chicago pizza just almost as a joke, and actually liked it. So I'm worried.
So he's not Italian anymore.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Sorry, we're taking your passport. Like you landed in Malpensa, and sorry, we gotta do.
I don't want to make enemies with an entire city, so
well, no, it's just that it's different. It is different. Cool. Again, Lorenzo, thank you for joining us today. Lorenzo Miniero from Meetecho, from the Janus Project, from JanusCon, and will be a speaker and moderator at FOSDEM. And I think that's it. Probably IETF member, and I don't know, musician. Go check out his music on Spotify.
Exactly. Don't expect anything great, but it's there. Yes.
Oh, cool. So and again, Lorenzo, thank you very much for joining us today. For the rest of the people, see you next week. Goodbye.